All right, we are live. Hello, John Meldrum.
Hello.
Thanks for coming on. I am really excited about this podcast. I say that every time. In fact, one of the questions I always ask people to, if they want to send anonymous questions, they can. And one of the first questions I got was from a past guest who will remain nameless, who asked who my favorite guest ever has been. And it's just so unfair. I'll just say, you, sir, you're the one. But no, I actually, every time I do one of these, I feel like it's the best one I've done because I'm getting better at it. My guests are super interesting, and I have fun learning about people. And yours was actually super interesting to me because you actually reached out to me and kind of suggested that you would like to have come on the podcast. And I don't know, I mean, we've known each other tangentially just through like BYU Management Society and running in the same circles as both being members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But I didn't really know anything about your story, and so I go, yeah, sure. So what topics do you want to talk about? And you were like, well, I had a faith crisis. And in my head, I was like, well, I did a faith crisis one. Okay. And you're like, and I'm divorced. And I go, okay. So that's actually something that I am interested in hearing more about is blended families within the church. I was like, okay. And then you were like, and I experienced same gender attraction. And I was like, go on. And you and then
Tell
you
me
and then
more.
yeah, and then you were like, and I'm a videographer, and you get whatever the things, and I go, okay, hold on a second. So I remember saying, like, did your faith crisis and your divorce have anything to do with your same gender attraction? And you confirmed it did. And then you also confirmed that you are still a member and you are remarried to another woman. And at that point I was like, this is going to be a good one. I got lots of questions, and I'm sure a lot of other people would too. And so I'm really excited that you are. I recognize how vulnerable it must be to come on a podcast that is going to be public and share a story like that, especially being you're a lifelong member of the church.
Yes, sir. Born and raised.
Okay, so I got to imagine you've experienced some things that the quote unquote rank and file or normal member doesn't go through. So I recognize now that I've done a few of these that this is a vulnerable experience for you, and I appreciate you coming on and being willing to share with us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Glad to be here.
So I want to start with, because it was actually, we had a really interesting interaction just a day or two ago. I sent you I always send out, like I said, a precursor of who's the next guest, and then I I solicit anonymous questions, and I sent it to you for more so just to make sure I had the story accurately. And there was one, and I said, just let me know if this is accurate and you're okay with it going out like this. And there was one area that you had a bit of an issue with, and the issue that you had was there was one point I said that you went on a mission, you were married in the temple, but that you were gay, and you said I would prefer, rather than being called gay, being called, or say that I experienced same gender attraction. And after a little bit of questioning back and forth, we decided to keep it as that you're gay, and then that we would talk about that when you came on the podcast. And so the first question I have out the gate is, what is it about being considered gay that you prefer to not be, I guess, well, maybe a better way to ask it is, do you not identify as being gay?
That's actually a really great question, Josh. There's a lot that goes with that. Labels are really powerful, and I think that when we choose to align with a certain label, that it can kind of transform our own thinking, and it also sends a message to people around us. And so I don't personally have a problem with the word. It doesn't bother me personally. If someone says, "Are you gay?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay, no problem, move on." But it kind of depends on who I'm with, who I'm talking to. Like if I'm in a church setting, I probably use the term, same-sex attraction or same-gender attraction. It's a little bit more sanitized, not as abrupt, or maybe I'm saving people's feelings. I don't know. But then the other side of it is that I feel like sometimes, like, I have to remind myself, oh yeah, I'm gay, because I kind of forget. Because
Oh,
there's another word out there that sometimes gets thrown around in my social circles called straight faking, where you present yourself to the world, in a very heterosexual way. Like most people who know me, they would never guess that I experience same-sex attraction or are gay, because I just don't present myself to that, and so it can be kind of shocking to people. But I think that probably my biggest issue is that when we use labels, it kind of gives people the excuse to put you in a box, and I don't
mm,
like to be put in a box.
yeah,
I would rather somebody sit down and really get to know me and hear my story, which is what we're doing today, and kind of dive a little bit deeper. I'm like, okay, well, what is he? What is it? Is he gay? Is he straight? Is he bi? Is he SSA? And honestly, that's a really kind of tough question, and I don't really have all the answers. But here's probably the closest thing I can probably divulge to people is I have a physical attraction to men, but I have more of a mental, emotional, kind of spiritual attraction to my wife. So there's a word that I've studied up on that's kind of close. It's called a demisexual, and that's where you're attracted to somebody based on their personality.
mm,
And so personalities are really, really, really important to me. Have connection is another word. So having
mm,
really strong connection, and that's what I really align with the most. If we're going to use labels and words, but again, gay, SSA, bi, they're just words. They're labels, and they kind of help people understand who I am. But at the end of the day, who I really am, it's like I'm a child of God.
yeah.
I am a believer. I'm a man of faith. I'm a husband. I'm a father. My same sex attraction is just one part of me, and it doesn't define who I am. It doesn't. I don't filter my life through everything through that. I embrace it, and I accept that it's part of who I am, which took a lot of time and a lot of self introspection to do that.
Yeah, well, I have a few things that I wanted to bring up on that. What you just said. There's so much that I could, so many roads I could go
Oh
down with
yeah,
what you just said.
lots of
The
different.
so the first thing I wanted to ask, just I'm trying to go through this chronologically with what you said. Does it ever get kind of tiring? Like you mentioned. Well, sometimes I'm trying to, kind of save somebody else's feelings. Does it ever get tiring having to kind of dance around it like that?
I think so. I think in the beginning it was really, really hard for me to talk about it, but the more I do, and the less I care what other people think, I just throw it out there. I chose to come out to my congregation or ward, for those of you who are familiar with LDS circles. I came out to my ward, and I did talk to my bishop beforehand, and not that I necessarily needed his permission, but I was asked to give a talk in front of my church, and out of respect for him, I was like, "Hey, this is something that's important to me, and would it be okay if I just mention it?" And he did. He supported it,
Hmm.
and I can't believe just the overwhelming love and support that people, they came up to me and shook my hand and gave me a hug and just said, "Hey, we love you." We recognize that was tough to do, and you did it. So I think the culture is shifting, and people are being more accepting, so that way people like me have the opportunity to come out in a safe way and have it be a positive experience, and not a negative one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting. The other question I had on this was you mentioned. Well, I have a few, but one was did you mentioned you are physically attracted to men, but more emotionally and spiritually connected to your wife. So two questions come out of that. One,
Hmm.
has it always been that way for you where you felt more emotionally attracted to women in general? And the other question is uh do do you are you physically attracted to women?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think throughout my lifetime, it's been a journey. I look at sexuality as a spectrum. I don't look at it as black and white. It's really multi-layered, messy, and like, I mean, think of when you were a teenager and your body was going through all these changes, and you're like, whoa, why did that, give me those feelings? Like, I don't know, they just
Right.
happen.
Right.
So navigating that is really, really, really tough. But to answer your question very simply, yeah, I'm attracted to my wife. I mean, we have a kid together, so clearly
Yeah.
that
It's
worked
working.
out. It was working.
It's working. Yeah.
And so luckily in the sexual intimacy department, that is something that I've been able to be okay with, and that has worked for me. I mean, I physically have three biological children from two separate relationships, so that's not in for me personally a problem. And I just want to say really quick that my journey, really quick, it doesn't represent everybody. Everybody on the LGBTQ plus spectrum has their own story and has their own journey. And I've actually, I'm part of something called North Star. And North Star is a nonprofit, seeks to align members of the LGBTQ community with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's a support system for them. And I was very fortunate to find them, and I've befriended a lot of other married men who are just like me, exact same situation in a lot of ways. And some of them, they struggle with the intimacy part. It takes a lot for them to be physically intimate with their wife, and they struggle. And we have our discussions together, and I feel for them, but luckily that's not something that has an issue that I've had to deal with.
So you mentioned the spectrum, and I just want to make sure I understand because I'm still learning this stuff, and I think a lot of people are, and I've heard the spectrum idea. So when you say it's a spectrum, I mean, are we talking about just a straight line? Like on one end there's heterosexuality, on another end there's there's gay or homosexuality, and then there's like bisexual somewhere in the middle, and then they can go across the spectrum, or is it different? Is it not just a straight line?
Oh, it's messy. It's all over the place, and it's like every day is different. Like some days I'm just like, well, that guy's pretty good looking. It'll catch my eye. It'll cross my mind. And then other days doesn't even register. So every day it's just woo 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 up and down,
Wow.
all over the place. So that's why I don't put too much stock in it, and that's why I'm like, okay, am I faking it? Like, is this real? Like, I've had to navigate those feelings, and kind of what I've landed on is this idea that I deep down have a strong desire for male connection. And unfortunately, during my kind of dark years of destruction, that I would seek out connection with men through engaging in sexual behavior that wasn't healthy. Just going around and doing things you probably shouldn't be doing. And without getting too into
Yeah.
gory details, but
Well, we want all the specifics here, John Meldrum. That's what kind of podcast this is. No,
Well,
no, I
yeah.
get what you're saying. No, okay.
yeah, and we can get into that more. But basically, post divorce, I had to know for myself, like, hey, is this the path I'm supposed to go down? Am I supposed to be with a man? Am I supposed to, engage in that lifestyle? And I did. I really tried. Like I was, meeting them and dating them and going out to clubs and just trying. But it was weird because like I felt like I was too holy to be part of that world. But then when I came back to church, I felt like I was too worldly to be part of the church. So I was in this weird in between kind of awkward situation trying to figure it all out. So I did that for about 3 years until I kind of got tired of guys, because the biggest hurdle that they suck. They really do.
That is
Men are,
I would say being tired of men would be a serious problem to being gay. Yes.
in the sense that right, but more in the sense that I had two children, and like I grew up in a religious, monogamous environment. That's what I was taught. That's what I that's what I believed in. That's what I was looking for. And to find that in the LGBTQ community, for me, it was a challenge. I couldn't find that. The minute people knew that I was religious or I had kids, it's like, nah, I just want to hit it and quit it. That was what they were looking for. And I was looking for something long term. And so I was tired of kind of playing games. And so I went back to dating women, and I was really hard, kind of switching gears. And first couple of days were awkward, but then I met my wife on the dating app called Mutual, if for those of you who've ever used it before. And we both swiped right, and it was funny because our fourth text message conversation, I said, "Oh, by the way, I've played for the other team, just so you know." Like,
Wow.
all cards on the table. And I'll never forget her response. She was like, "Well, at least you didn't abandon your children."
Yeah. Well,
And I was just
that's
like,
true.
mind blown. I'm like, okay, I guess there's something to this. This girl didn't just write me off. Now, but funny enough, she kind of had her wild streak too. She was raised in the church, but she stopped going to church for 10 years, and she definitely lived a very worldly lifestyle and had been with some men in some previous relationships. So she was very, very understanding and very non-judgmental. So I appreciated that.
Well, there's. I want to back up a little bit to some of the stuff, and perhaps this would also, after I ask these questions, it'd be a good time to kind of go back and see if we can chronologically go.
Yeah,
through
yeah,
this.
for sure.
But the first thing I want to ask mention is, that feeling you have of, well, I'm a little too worldly here, and I'm a little too holy there. I mean, I'm not. I have not experienced anything similar to what you've experienced. But I have experienced a situation where I have felt like I didn't really fit. You mentioned boxes before. And one of the things that, I've always felt is because my family is very non-traditional Mormon. I mean, my dad is a Jew, and he converted, and my grandma on my mother's side was Catholic. Other than my immediate family, none of my other family really has even a link to the church, and so and I like, I've always been rough and tumble. I've always been, kind of a wrestler and loved hard rock music and lots of fight sports and things like that. Always loved off-color humor. So I always felt like same thing, like I was almost like too conservative for my worldly friends, but also a little too hard rock for my Mormon friends. So I think that that's something that a lot of people feel. And one thing a friend of mine said, who actually is a transgendered wrestler, who I've had on the podcast, she said to me, she goes, if you don't fit in anyone's box, create your own box that other people can fit into. And it sounds like that's what you found. And you and the people at North Star are doing that. So that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I'll never forget. I went to one of the North Star conferences, and Jared Halverson, he's got this really great podcast. It's called Unshaken Saints, and he basically talked about like finding the grace between two contrasts. I'm butchering it, but essentially okay, do you remember the story of Jesus Christ and the woman taken in adultery? Mm-hmm. What's interesting about that story is he points out that Jesus never condemned her, nor did he condone her behavior. So go back and read that story. So he never condemned her and he never condoned her. He was able to find the grace, the in-between of two impossible situations where you have the law of Moses and then you have, justice and mercy, these two conflicting ideals. And I'm sure as, an attorney, you always have to look for those, those little silver linings. Yeah. But I'll never forget that because basically he said that there's two extremes or two polar opposites points, but there is a place in the middle, and that's where you are. And it's like, yes, I can identify with that, and ever since then I've been able to, like you were saying, create that box and be happy to be in that box, and not try too hard to conform to any one ideal or lifestyle. I'm just going to be me and love me for who I am, and everyone else can just kick rocks.
That's the way it's got to be. I've talked to a lot of members, and I talk to a lot of people who they struggle sometimes with faith. What has normally been called a faith crisis, but I think that's changing more to like a faith journey, like you're referring to it. But yeah, a lot of the times it seems as though people struggle because of other people, and I just go like. Yeah. I don't understand. I mean, I've never really had it's frustrating. Sure, people are judgmental, and you get that in any religion, any group of people. There's a lot of gossip and a lot of, people being holier than thou, and sticking the finger at someone else's eye, or in the face when they got three other fingers pointing back at them. They're, but anyhow, going off back to the chronology. So you're lifelong member. When do you start noticing that you're experiencing things a little differently than maybe some of your other member friends?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was looking back on it, I was in severe denial. Like, I can remember some of my earliest homoerotic experiences was, I think, as early as like middle school. Like, just looking at my male gym teachers differently. I'm like, oh, okay, there's something there, and I didn't realize it at the time, but those were kind of like my first kind of thoughts and experiences of it. But I never really considered myself gay because that went against with my beliefs and what I was taught. So what do? Bury it. Just bury it, like, oh, that's not me. That's not who I am, and then sadly, when other young boys who actually had the courage to come out during those awful teenage years, I didn't join in the teasing, but I didn't do much to defend them either.
Now, is this real quick? Sorry to interrupt. Is this like mid to late 90s?
So my high school years were from 2002 to 2006.
Okay, so you're a little bit past me. I graduated in 99, and yeah, I can tell you in the mid to late 90s, like, whew, oh boy.
Yeah. Oh man.
Time.
If your peers, your male peers said, "Oh, you're gay," or did anything that was considered, queer, you were just branded and you were ostracized. It was bad, whether you were or not. You just didn't want to be, called that because it's just social suicide. So you keep that on lock. You don't say anything to anybody, and especially if you're like you mentioned earlier, you had the kind of the wrestler build. I was skinny. I was just a skinny twig kid. I was more of like I was a cross country runner, soccer. Basketball kid. That was more my body type. So that was the sports I did.
Yeah. Wow. So you start feeling this in middle school. You're kind of putting it away. Was there a time in your high school years where you just kind of started struggling with this, or that you're kind of having a bit of cognitive dissonance, if you will, on this?
Yeah, there was an incident that happened. I won't go into details in case this person's listening, but I had some exploratory experiences that I was like, I should probably come forward and tell priesthood authority about. And let me tell you, there is nothing more awkward than talking about sexual behaviors with adult men that aren't in your family. That could be a whole nother topic we can talk about, but it's extremely intimidating and very uncomfortable. And luckily, church policy has changed quite a bit nowadays, where parents can either be a part of that discussion, or there's some alternative things in the handbook that can happen. But back when I was a kid, my dad was the bishop. Oh, whew, that was tough. I didn't go to him. I skipped him. I went straight to the stake president because I wasn't going to
Right.
say anything to my dad. No way,
Sure.
man.
How was that? How was that met with at that time?
It was met with concern and love, and my stake president was really great, and he wasn't concerned about me, and it did not disqualify me from serving a full-time 2-year mission. So we kind of saw the beginning stages of a shift in attitude towards people who experience same-sex attraction, and kind of the attitude was starting to improve and get better. The embers were there. The work in the the previous decades, the work had been done to the point where by the 2000s and definitely into the 2010s, like there was a lot more support, understanding for people who experience same-sex attraction.
Yeah. Now, how old were you when this was going on? Like, you still in high school?
Yeah. Experimentation, and that was all just in high school.
And when you're talking about experimentation, I mean, you and just a friend, or like, next thing you know, something weird, like, for you happens, and you're, kind of the same thing that all of us had. Okay, like most of us probably had a situation or two when you were dating somebody that, got a little, got a little handsy.
Right, yeah. Things escalate, and like before you know it, you're like, "Ooh, why did I do that? Probably shouldn't have done that." So, I won't get into.
No, yeah, and I don't want details. I just, what I'm saying is so it's something happened with a guy, and you went and told your stake president, and it sounds like your stake president,
exactly.
Your stake president was showed Christ-like love to you.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why, for me, I was able to emotionally heal from that, compartmentalize that, stick it in a box, stick it on the shelf, and then not revisit that box for years. So,
but during that time when you stuck it in this box and kind of bury it. I mean, are you still experiencing same gender attraction? Are you still looking at guys and finding them attractive? And
every day. Oh yeah.
And so now in this same time frame, are you receiving some sort of attraction to females as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of my upbringing and just having really positive experiences with females, and I mean, I have 3 older sisters. I've got 3 older brothers, so I have a lot of experience with both genders. In terms of just like relationships, like I know how to talk to men, I know how to talk to women. So girls didn't scare me, and I enjoyed going on dates with them. In fact, I was kind of Mr. Popular in some ways. I would go to all the church dances. I went on lots of dates with girls, lots of group dates, and I enjoyed myself. And I had no problem like going on dates with women, and that was the expectation, and the church encouraged it. So it was a great time for me. I never had those feelings of like, oh, I hate this. Da, da, da. No, I loved it. Like I was definitely in my element. So that wasn't an issue for me.
And you were, I mean, did you have girlfriends? Was there people that you were emotionally attracted to and you wanted to hang on to for times?
Yeah. I actually did have a girlfriend in high school. I had some girls that I dated, but probably I wouldn't consider her a girlfriend because we weren't exclusive. Like we didn't like DTR it, determine the relationship, you know?
Yeah.
Or it's like, you.
I gotta tell you, a lot of the time, this is gonna sound so terrible, but back when, the DTR, the define the relationship talk for a long time, as soon as that talk came, I was like, oh, well, we're defining it as we're not having a relationship.
Yeah.
The DTR kills it, man. The DTR kills it.
It does.
It kills the relationship. As soon as you have that, so where is this going conversation, you're like, ugh, here we go. Oh man. Yeah.
Exactly.
So you're dating girls, and now let me ask you, the experimentation part, does this happen more than once? And if so, is there like a specific time frame, or was it like there was a little time frame and you put it in a box and it didn't happen again for years, is what it sounded like? But are we talking about a year or two where you're kind of experimenting with this, or is it like there was a couple instances and I was like, I got to put that away?
Yeah, it was just a one-time thing. It was kind of like
Huh.
I kind of came out of nowhere. I'm like, ooh, where did this come from?
Mm.
This probably isn't a good thing. So
Yeah.
I hit the brakes on that real fast, and then put it in a box, put it on the shelf, and just pretend it didn't happen, and just kept
Okay.
lying to myself for many years. Not
Wow.
unpack
Yeah.
that box.
So then after that happens and you're starting to find um, men attractive, you're not thinking maybe I'm gay when this is going on?
Yeah, I like I said, I had a lot of self deception. I just lied to myself a lot. Like those thoughts were just so deep and buried in my subconscious that it never, I never really stopped and entertained the idea that I might be gay. I never even let my brain go there. So
Hmm.
I definitely kept myself in a bubble, and unfortunately whether that was because of external forces doing it to me or I was just so scared and I was doing it to myself, whatever the case is, it wasn't healthy. I wasn't addressing my emotional needs in a healthy way. And as you're going to see as we go through the chronology, how it blew up in my face in a really big way.
Yeah, well, that's yeah, we'll get there, but I want to ask a couple more questions here. So
Sure.
one, there's probably somebody out there, and you can tell me if you think this is true or not. There's probably someone out there who's listening to this, probably someone who's not a member of the church, or maybe someone who is, and they're listening to this and they're saying, "Man, the reason why you're denying yourself, kind of like what you talked about, straight faking, right? Like
Hmm.
you're denying yourself because you've been programmed by the church to deny yourself. What would you say to that person who says that?
Oh, I say, come on over. Let's have a good chat because I have some words for you, my friend. That question absolutely had crossed my mind, and I can tell you. So one of the I know I'm kind of breaking chronology a little bit, but to answer your question, post divorce, single gay Mormon dad, just unhappy, depressed, just missing my children like crazy. I did deal with suicide ideation, which, for those of you who don't know,
Mm,
it's not attempting suicide, it's letting those thoughts, kind of
yeah.
grow in your mind. And that was happening to me. And that was a real thing that I struggled with. And so I wasn't well and I needed to get help. And just to kind of make this short and sweet so we can get back to the chronology, I made a very conscious decision when I'll never forget, I was in my room and I prayed a prayer and I stripped myself away from everything. I was like, I don't care what religion I am, what my parents say, what family, what friends, like just this is me as raw and as real as you can get. And I asked myself, what do I want in life? Or like, do you, or actually, it was even before that, I said, do you want to live? And I said, yeah, I do want to live. I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
good, great. You want to live.
Right. Right.
Well, what do you want to do with your life? Well, I want to be happy. Okay, great. Well, what makes you happy? Oh, well, I felt the happiest when I was close to God. Okay, great. What do you want to do about God? Well, I want to get to know Him. Even though we were not on speaking terms, there's some bitterness there. But I decided that I was going to put God back in my life. And so, piece by piece, I started putting my life back together. And I didn't do it because the church told me to do it. I didn't do it because family expected me to do it. I did it because I wanted to do it. And that is why I'm a different person today.
Mm,
Before, the church would tell me what to do and I would follow. It's reverse now. I do what I want to do and I choose to follow because that's who I am. That's what
mm,
I'm choosing.
mm,
And that's very, very important because what you just said, there are a lot of us who do follow the church because it's been programmed into us. Well, my programming broke and it broke hard. So
wow.
I reprogrammed myself and I put the pieces back because I chose to do it. So nobody else can tell me that my choices are because of external forces. I am who I am today because I chose it, and I'm
Wow.
a lot happier because of that.
Wow. Well, that's great to hear. That's great to hear. And that's the thing that I think is because you know, I know that I have friends who are outside of the church who are a part of the LGBTQ community. And when
Yes.
they hear this, I know they're going to say something like, well, you're not living your true self and you're not doing this stuff. And my
Hmm.
response to that, as being, look, I'm a straight male Mormon. Okay. So I don't know if I should be talking about it, but in my view, I just think, well, listen, John Meldrum, this is what he chooses. He identifies as a child of God just as much as he identifies as someone who has same gender attraction or is gay or whatever you want to say it. And if he chooses to live that life, why is that any different than someone who chooses to live their life in a way that exemplifies sexuality? Like, you don't have to be a practicing gay man if that isn't what's making you happy, and it sounds like that didn't make you happy.
Yeah. Here's two thoughts that to my LGBTQ friends out there listening to this, what I would say to you guys is, like I said earlier, everyone has their own path and their own story. For me, I had children, and I had really considered their future. Like, if I was to go and be in a long term relationship with another man, their future, I had to take that into consideration. That mattered. And so for me, I couldn't just run off to the sunset with my Prince Charming or whatever. But the other thing that I had to that I would say to my LGBTQ friends is that when we've been hurt very deeply, either by people in the church or by doctrines that we feel are unfair. One thing that I was very careful when I was coming back to church was not to be a victim. I feel like there's a lot of victimization out there in the sense that, oh, well, the church did this to me, or the church doesn't accept my lifestyle, so therefore I can't be my true self, and so I need to now attack the church, or disagree with them, or call them out on their errors, because I can't own up to my own mistakes, or just can't I can't process and deal with what's going on. And at the end of the day, the church they're a private religious organization. They can do whatever they want. If they feel like marriage is between a man and woman, that's their prerogative. I can either jump on the bandwagon or not. But I just chose to not give that much power to the church. If I were to sit there and say, my life is messed up because the church did this to me, that's like giving all the power to them. And what I learned from my divorce is that holding on to anger and hate, you are giving your power and your agency to that person. They now control you. They're no longer with you anymore, but they're still controlling your thoughts because you can't let go of hate and bitterness. And unfortunately, to a lot of my LGBTQ friends who probably have been truly hurt, and I don't want to diminish their feelings or condescend to them in any way. Like, they have real true hurt. I've talked with a lot of them, and I don't want to diminish that, but there comes a point where you have to let it go, and you have to forgive, and you have to move on, and you just got to love the people of the church. They're trying their best, just like you are. And we're all human, and we're all on this journey together, and we all need to be respectful and show love to one another. And if there are those of us who want to stay in the church, respect that choice. And if those of us who want to leave for whatever reason, we'll love you too.
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of struck a chord with me. I gotta be honest. This whole idea, I carry some anger because of my own personal personal situations with relationships, and
Yeah.
and that's a hard lesson to learn, especially when someone's hurt you. And I like what you said because I know it's true. It's hard when you're experiencing it, but
Yeah. Oh, it is. It was not
but
easy. It took me years to get to this point where I could truly let it go.
yeah, it's funny. I've often said this is me being a little more vulnerable. I keep myself pretty private with this situation, but like I sometimes wish I could just jump forward to that place, and it just, but it's a journey. But this isn't about me. This is about John Meldrum. So John, I wanted to ask you something because you said something, and it struck a question for me because I've heard, you mentioned, you said I had to take my kids into account, and I can't just run off with my Prince Charming. And
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people who are, some would call anti-LGBTQ or something of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Who have said things like that, but I've never heard it from somebody who's gay or has same gender attraction. Is there something about, what was it about you running off with a man that you felt wouldn't be good for your kids?
That's a great question. And disclaimer, for all of you same gender couples out there who have children, I applaud you for taking the opportunity to adopt and raise children. That's not easy. That's a hard thing to do. And I'm not diminishing your choice at all. For me, I had to really sit down and seriously consider what that would mean. And I would say a lot of it was a lot of fear in the beginning, because you have to remember my divorce is extremely bitter. Like, my ex-wife does not like me at all. And she took my children away from me and tried to continually take my children away from me. I was scared. I was absolutely terrified that if I were to marry a man or be in a long-term relationship with him, that she would do everything in her power to make sure I never see my children again. Now, that's horrible.
Even here in California? I mean,
Even here in California.
you thought that here in California that the courts would do that? I'm curious because it's
Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
to me because we're in It's funny because here we are in California and we're so quote unquote progressive, right? But it's also the state that passed Prop 8. So
Yeah. It depends on the judge. I've been in
Yeah.
court. I've been in family court long enough to know that a lot of it boils down to the judge, and if you can pay for a good attorney. If you've got a judge who is more balanced between mothers and fathers, good for you. If you have them that they're kind of a man hater a little bit, then you're kind of screwed. In general, courtrooms across the United States favor women over men. You will never find a more father, anti-man. What's the word I'm looking for? Basically, men have to be perfect in family court. If we do anything that breeds any type of neglect or abuse, we will get everything taken away from us. So we have to be perfect. And unfortunately for me, I was very naive to courts. When I first started negotiating the whole divorce process, I thought to myself, well, I work 5 days a week, so I can only really take the kids 2 days a week. So yeah, maybe that should be the parenting plan. Whoa, big mistake there, because that became the parenting plan for the next 4 frickin' years. And I fought like hell to get my children back and drained all of my money and went into absurd amount of debt just so I could see my kids. I mean... So, but kind of going back to your question of why did I, take my kids into consideration? I don't know if this is going to make sense, but I grew up with a mother and a father that went to church and had a heterosexual mother-father nuclear family dynamic. That's what I was raised with. And yeah, it's a little bit hardwired into me. And so I think deep down inside, I felt a little selfish, denying my children the opportunity to have a mother figure in the home. Because women have such amazing qualities that men just simply don't have. And I wanted that for them. Even though I was attracted to men, I just felt like women just can offer something that men can't. So that was another big thing I had to weigh. Is another big reason why I started dating women again. So,
Wow, that's interesting. It's funny you bring that up because I just, I don't have a ton of experience in the family courts, but
oh,
I it just hasn't. I just haven't had. With the court system in general, I haven't. I mean, I'm a personal injury attorney, right? That's where most of my the civil justice system is really more what I see, but I just haven't experienced that yet. And I know a lot of the judges. Were you in Placer County then?
Oh
You're in
yeah, I
Placer.
go up to
Yeah.
Santucci Justice Center. I know the
Yeah.
judges.
Okay. Yeah.
I know them
Yeah. I
all.
don't. I'm not as. I'm familiar with the civil judges over there, and I'm familiar with all the Sacramento County judges, and I've. So it's interesting that you bring that up. But anyway, let's go back to the chronology. So you get through high school, you serve a mission,
Two
right? You
years,
serve 2 years. Where'd you go?
Las Vegas, Nevada West.
Oh, nice, interesting. Okay, and good experience.
Great, loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. Had
Yeah,
a good time.
yeah, I loved it.
Yeah.
Loved serving with my fellow missionaries, and just like any other missionary out there, we worked hard some days, and other days we didn't work as hard, and you know how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny. So you go and serve a mission. You come back. You came back then in what, 2008?
Yes, tail end of
Okay.
2008.
Okay. And then how long after you got back did you get married?
Great question. So, to fill in those couple of years, I went to BYU, Idaho from 2009 to 2013. And it wasn't until my senior year, my very last year, last semester or two, is where I met my first wife. We got married in 2012. So there was probably a 4 year. I was 24 years old when I got married.
Wow, you were old hat then for members.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I thought BYU Idaho. It's like you married in 3 weeks or your money back. I mean, that's
Yeah,
just,
right. That's the thing.
Yeah.
The disclaimer, it says you're not married in the first semester. You get your money back for sure.
I just remember the movie The RM was so funny because it seemed like that when I came home. It seemed like when I came home, everybody was dating, and within like a month or two, they were engaged and they were
Oh
married.
yeah. Oh.
And so, like, I had a lot of friends who, I mean, like, they are like married within 6 months to a year after coming home,
It's
and
true.
man,
It's all true.
and a lot of them are it's an interesting. It's just an interesting cultural thing within the Mormon Church. It's so foreign to everybody else.
Yeah. Right. And there are some good things and bad things for that. For me, it was a bad thing because I rushed into my first serious relationship and then rushed into marriage. And I should have dated one-on-one long-term relationship instead of just kind of hanging out, maybe going on a couple of dates, like actual serious one-on-one relationship. That's what I needed. And so that's why I feel like when my kids turn 16, I'm okay with them actually dating because I want them to get the experience of interpersonal relationships with the opposite sex. Yeah, there's always that risk of having sex, but that's why we do our best as parents to teach them so that way they make the right choice when the time comes to it.
So when you say you're okay with them dating when they're 16, do you mean like
One-on-one.
exclusively one person?
Exclusive one-on-one. Absolutely.
that's
I'm okay with that because then you turn like what happened to me. I didn't exclusively date. I just kind of went on group dates and I never had that one-off, kind of intimate one-on-one experience. I didn't know what I liked and what I didn't like, what worked for me, what didn't. I just basically married the first person that I ever seriously dated. And so I was very naive and
That's so interesting, and I'll tell you why that's interesting to me, because I had a very different experience. And my experience was I dated around. I had, like, I would say she was probably more of a best friend than a high school. She was more of a best friend than a high school girlfriend. I was just head over heels for her and was chasing her around for years. And she was the only one I had eyes for, and I went on dates with a bunch of other women. I went on to homecomings and stuff with people, but I never had like a really serious girlfriend, other than kind of this weird, unhealthy relationship I had with this one, and I look back and now I tell my kids, I'm like, hey, don't get hung up on one person, because I missed out on so many cool opportunities to go and date all these other women and get a sense of what I liked and didn't like and get that experience. And then when I came back from my mission, I was still head over heels for her. She was, she wrote me every week and I thought that was the one. And it didn't work out, and she's gone now. She's somewhere else, and I assume she's happy. I haven't talked to her in 2 decades, but I mean, it sounds like she's happy and doing great, and that's great. But yeah, I tell my son, I go, I hope that you don't pair off. But your experience was you did the opposite, and you wish you had.
Yeah, so I think it strikes a balance. Maybe exclusively date, maybe give it 6 to 12 months. If it ain't going anywhere, move on.
Yeah, yeah. That was actually because that was my experience too. Is I felt like within 3 weeks to a month, usually I had a good sense of whether it was going to work out or not. And it
Yeah,
was like,
exactly.
and then after that, I was like, man, this isn't going to work. Next,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And everyone's different. Maybe there are like there are crazy people like my parents who met and like 14 days later were engaged, and like they're one of those crazy whirlwind romance kind of people. But and then there's me who was just like super naive and like was secretly gay and didn't realize it. So
There's that too. Well, okay, so then I take it, by the time you get married, had you come to grips with the fact that you had same gender attraction, that you were gay?
Yeah. So let's back up a bit. Come home from mission. That's when I started to get into pornography. I used pornography as a way to deal with my anxiety and depression. It was very hard for me to come back from a 2-year mission where I was not around my family. I have kind of a rough. At the time, I had a rough relationship with my parents. I felt like I was just. See, I'm the youngest of 7 kids, so I felt like I was just a little worker bee, and I felt like they didn't make time for me and my siblings, and I didn't feel close and connected with them like other parents were. And I spent 2 years seeing amazing, just really truly awesome, loving LDS families, and just seeing how families could be. And then I come back home and just seeing that environment again, it was devastating for me. It was devastating to the point where I started getting into pornography, and I ultimately left within 6 weeks. I went back to my mission. I lived there for 8 months until college started. I couldn't be around my family. It was just too depressing. Wow. And so now I was secluded. I was alone. I was God, I can't talk. I was spiraling the drain, just getting deeper and deeper into pornography. 95% of it was gay pornography.
And at this time, but when this is going on, are you coming to grips with the fact that you're gay?
Not yet, because I thought to myself, well, it's just pornography. That's not same-sex attraction. It's just pornography, right? So, again, just lying to myself, compartmentalizing it.
Now, looking back at that, looking at it now, do you realize you're like, that was kind of not, like, let me back up and say this. There are times when I had gone and done, so, I would go and do something or whatever, and I would justify it, and I look back and I'm like, well, that was silly.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I hadn't left. I wish I would have stuck around and tried to make my relationship with my parents better. We're okay now. Things are fine now. I've moved on from all the past hurts and everything, so everything's good.
Well, hold on a second. Let me back up and explore that a little bit. So the past hurts. You're saying that like you felt like a worker bee. You felt like you didn't. They didn't give you the connection. What do you think you were looking for, and what did you see in the families on the mission? Because there's one thing that the one thing I've learned is all of those people that you look at and you're like, wow, they look like they really have it together. None of them have it together.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, just like simple things like, hey, come to my game or come to my concert. My parents never pushed me to get my Eagle Scout award. It's just like,
you're lucky, sir.
Yeah, maybe I dodged a bullet there, right? Or if I needed money for things, like the answer is just always no. I had to work for everything. It's a good and bad thing. I was raised to be a lone wolf. I was a kid. And if I wanted a birthday party, I had to plan everything and do everything. And like I had to do it all. I had to do everything myself, and I just felt like I didn't feel like it was true. Like I couldn't rely on my parents for things like that, because they grew up in the era where you got to rub dirt on it and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, young man, and that's just how the world is, and get used to it. And it's just there was just no compassion, and I was just like, I reject that. I think that's a bunch of bullshit, and I dote over my children. I'm there sitting down with them, doing homework with them. I spoil them rotten, and yeah, I choose to use my time and money on them because I love them and I care about them. So I've 180'd it from my parents. And if they're listening to it, I'm sorry, but that's just how I feel.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I had a, my upbringing was good. My parents are good people, but they struggled quite a bit while I was especially when I was in high school. They struggled quite a bit, and I at times I felt like, maybe they were so wrapped up in their own stuff that they didn't have time. But at the same time, I mean, my parents did go, like if I had a basketball game, they came,
Yeah.
and things like that. And but no, it's interesting. Do you think I mean, you said you had three brothers and three sisters. Do you ever talk to them? Do you kind of all feel this way, or is this exclusive to you?
Oh yeah, we all feel this way. All seven of us are. We all have strained relationships with our parents. I'm actually probably the most kind of what's the word? I'm open, welcoming, forgiving. Like I've just decided to move on from it. There's no point in wallowing in the past. So,
Of your family members, how many are still active at church?
all seven.
Oh, really? Okay, that's interesting. So you have this issue. You start with pornography, and and 95% of it is gay pornography, and you're still kind of compartmentalizing that. And you have
Yes.
4 years. I mean, is this going on continuously, or is it times where it was really rampant and you went to a bishop and it went away for a while? How's that go?
Yeah. So yeah, very similar. So like I'd be feeling bad, beating myself up, and then I'd go in the bishop's office, and he'd say, "Okay, well, stop taking the sacrament for a few weeks, and just don't do it again. Have have a nice day. Don't let the door hit you on the way out." So, I mean, I was dealing with Eastern Idaho farming guys,
Right.
and to delve into the deep psychological reason, like they just bishops are not psychologists, they're not finance experts, they're just people, and sometimes you might get bishops who can really like help you through that, but they're not industry professionals, and to help you navigate that just wasn't going to happen. So
Yeah,
I
it's
was
funny. It's funny you bring that up because I've had similar experiences. Here's what I would say about that, because I've heard this. This is something that I've referred to, bishop's roulette. I've heard that quite a bit, and this is something that's near and dear to me because of stuff that's happened in my own life and in family and things like that. When it came to this, I've had some bishops that I am sure, especially like getting me out on a mission, man. Like I am convinced my leaders were there specifically to get me out on a mission, because I wouldn't have gone if it wasn't for a very good young men's president and young men's leaders and a very good bishop who really pushed me. A couple of them, that really worked on me. But then I've had some bishops where I'm like, man, this ain't so great. And I'm not really feeling it. But sometimes, like, does it mean that they're not called of God? Like, no, I don't think that's necessarily true, just because, and who knows, maybe they're, I often wonder, I wonder how that works in the grand scheme of the cosmos and in the universe.
Well, I can answer that for you. So just remember the scripture: many are called, but few are chosen. And why are they not chosen? Because their hearts were so set upon the things of the world that they forget this one lesson, that the rights of the priesthood are inseparably connected with the powers of heaven, and that the powers of heaven cannot be handled except upon principles of righteousness, of patience, love, and fame. What's basically the pure love of Christ. So you can be called as a bishop, but you still have to have those Christ-like attributes to be chosen. So,
Sure. The thing is, though, is like you said, I mean, we're dealing with imperfect people, and if there's one thing that I've learned, I've done a couple of podcasts now with PhDs who've really honed in on church history, the church leaders, and they're more, and for me personally, it's kind of faith strengthening because you sit there and you realize that even at the top, they're still human.
yeah.
They still struggle with their own issues and their own probably
Oh, yeah.
own things, and man, that's faith promoting for me because if one of these guys who are a prophet or apostle, a stake president, a bishop can be struggling so hard, I got a
yeah.
shot. I got a
Well,
shot.
I'll tell you, this might blow your mind a little bit. I've actually been in porn addiction recovery groups with people who were former bishops and high councilmen. So,
That doesn't shock me at all.
no, no,
No,
it
it
doesn't.
doesn't shock me at all.
Because
I
it's,
mean,
it's,
go
oh,
ahead.
go
Sorry.
ahead.
I was just going to say, this is a problem. It's a problem for everybody, and I mean, I wouldn't be
Exactly.
surprised if there were stake presidents that are dealing with this. I mean, I have
Oh, yeah.
had leaders. This is in no way. Sometimes people have accused me of like bashing. I'm not. I'm not. It's highlighting a point, and that is that I have had some of the best leaders. My mission presidents, both of them, best men I ever met. Would take a bullet for either one of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
My bishop, the bishop that got me out, he went to bat for me when a lot of people didn't buy what Josh Edlow was selling. And same with my young men's leaders. And I've had members of stake presidencies that I know get excommunicated. I mean, they're not, and the excommunication process is something that we can talk about another day. But like,
I,
they're,
I've been through that.
okay, all right. So we can talk about that with you because I that's something I really want to talk about. But my point is that it doesn't matter. The calling doesn't matter. You're still dealing with imperfect people. So, but anyhow, okay. So you're going through this, and now where do we go from here? So you meet your wife.
Yes. So we meet, and when we get married, obviously, that the door of being sexually active opens, and boy, let me tell you, it just opened up a whole new world for me. Porn was just not even. It was just. It's like, well, that's nice. This is so much better.
Okay, so you mean sexual intimacy with your first wife?
Yeah,
Like
yeah. It
stopped
just
you from watching porn?
Well, yeah, because like I mean, we've been eating, little hors d'oeuvres, but then they bring out this giant cake, and I was like, ooh, I want the cake. Forget these little finger foods.
John, I'm on a cut right now. I'd really love some cake. Anyway, so
Yeah.
so go ahead. Yeah.
So unfortunately, we first year of marriage, great. Like I mean, there's that adjustment period. You still with me?
All right, round two. Apologize. Technical difficulties. Internet stinks. You were saying.
No problem. So basically, what I was saying is after I got married and I engaged in sex with my first wife, that just completely opened up a whole new world to me, and we were great the first year together. But as you know, as marriages tend to get stressful, and college and finances and everything, I started to kick back to my old self-destructive behaviors. Only this time it was now added with this new kind of addiction. So it wasn't just porn anymore. Then it started to be, oh, well, look at that guy. I bet I could do things with him. And so, unfortunately for me, I started to not just entertain the idea, but act on that idea. And it's something to this day that I still feel really bad about. But I started to act on those impulses and those urges, and then just kind of tell myself, well, it's not that bad. Kind of downplay it, diminish it, again, put it in a box,
Mm-hmm.
put the box somewhere else, and just compartmentalize it, and not deal with it. And I did that sadly, for years. Didn't tell my wife. Now, I will say this, though. My first wife, I couldn't even talk about pornography with her without her just breaking down and being like, "How could you do this to me?" And she's not the only one. To you LDS women out there is nothing more hurtful, harmful, debilitating thing that you can do than to create a negative space where your husband can't open up to you and talk about his struggles, because he's going to feel judged. He's going to feel like he can't tell you the pains in his heart. And us guys, we're not going to go to other guys and be like, "Hey, yeah, dude, I got this porn problem, and let me tell you all about it." Like, we just don't.
I've got this gay porn problem. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
that's
even worse. Yeah.
Sure.
So what do? Bury it, stuff it down, just bury it, bury it, bury it. And after years and years and years of burying it, it definitely affected our relationship. And she didn't know exactly what the issue was, but she knew something was wrong. And until a few years later, so the story goes, we were flying to go visit my family in Washington, and on the way back, she left her phone on the plane, and you could track it, and you could see the phone like pinging around the United States. Well, while she was waiting to get her phone back, because we called the airline, she decided to use my computer so that way she could message people she needed to. Well, unfortunately for me, my iPhone sunk to my computer, and when she went up to messages to type people, unfortunately, she saw some pretty compromising text messages, and then some pictures. Dope. So she confronted me about that, and then the gig was up. It's like, oh, can't lie anymore. So I did what I thought was the best thing to do, was just to tell the truth. I'm like, okay, well, here we go. You want the truth? Here we go. I just unloaded on her, and to her credit, that was not easy to do. To sit there and to listen to your husband tell you that, "Oh, I've cheated on you with other men." That's kind of a double whammy. And it's something that, like I said, to this day, that I still regret and feel really bad about. But there was something freeing about that. Like, okay, finally I can be the real me and just say things as it were. But instead of healing and coming together, 2 days later, she packed up her stuff and she was gone. Didn't want anything to do with me anymore. Just
let me ask you some questions about that. And here's the thing, it's interesting. Some of this, I'm trying not to bring my my own, I don't know, trauma and biases to some of this. I hope you understand that, because
Right.
every marriage is different, and I don't know yours, but I have some questions based on what you just said. And the first one would be, when you were dating, did you communicate with her at all about your porn issues?
Yes.
Did she know you had them? Oh, she did. Okay.
She did. Yeah, I was open with that. That was hard. That was almost a deal breaker for her. It was very close.
So there's, and the reason I ask is because sometimes, like, did she know that you were dealing specifically with same gender attraction? Did she know that was a part of it?
I did not tell that to her because I was still in denial at the time.
Yeah.
So
So did she ever communicate? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you if you had more to say.
No, just the fact that I didn't start coming to grips and accepting it until after we separated.
Got it. So I guess, like, when you come out to her, I mean, you're right. You even acknowledge it's a double whammy. I mean, the betrayal trauma is very real.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot of compartmentalization that you were doing throughout this whole process. Like you even said so yourself, well, it's not quite that bad, it's not really what, and the next thing you know, you're down a rabbit hole, I'm sure, you know,
Yeah.
and you realize, wow. And when she left you a couple of days later, did she communicate? Was it was it the cheating, or was it the fact that it was a gay cheating?
It, yeah. So, from my recollection, it was, yeah, the gay component of it was a big deal to her, and it was the fact that she felt like our marriage wasn't valid because we never should have been married in the first place, and that one hurt a lot because we had
So
two kids.
is she saying that because, well, you're gay? Is that what she's?
I think part of it was to maybe save face, kind of protect her own feelings. Because I'm like, oh, well, I married a gay guy. Like, oh, well, that marriage wasn't valid because he never should have married me because he was never worthy. Was what was told
Oh,
to me.
it was a worthiness issue.
I
I
was,
see.
yeah. So there was, and I can say this now that years have gone by. The way that she has treated me has been full of bitterness. It's been very visceral, a lot of hate, and I can only trace that back to, plain and simple, it's just homophobia. It's this idea that she just can't accept the fact that she was in a marriage with a man who experienced same-sex attraction, and that's just too much for her to process and deal with. The shame of it's too great, and that's where we can do better as a Christian community to not create that environment by being accepting, or that's by being accepting of people who have same-sex attraction. Then I think it would have created a dialogue between us where it was like, hey, you betrayed me and that hurt, but I'm willing to accept your same-sex attraction and work on that. But because she wasn't in that headspace, that wasn't on the table. So she's just like gone.
Well, let me ask you. The reason I bring this up is because, like, I actually remember having a conversation with another well, former friend about this very topic, and he very different, very different circumstance than what you're talking about. But like, but I remember asking him. I go, well, you understand why she left, right? I mean, like,
Right.
it's because it sounds like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because I don't know your story, but it sounds like to me as an observer, you she I can only imagine she's thinking this isn't something I signed up for, right?
Yeah,
Like
I think that's a fair statement.
yeah, like she knew you had some issues with pornography, but she definitely did not sign up to be with somebody who deals with same gender attraction. And I can just say that I'm sure the betrayal trauma alone is jarring enough. I mean, to have your reality changed in an instant.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's almost like you're in the middle of the multiverse and you get thrown into an alternate reality and you can't get back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
Well,
hard.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so but I guess you tell me, do you think it was more that she hasn't been able to get to kind of let go of the betrayal trauma, or do you think it's a level of just, because I guess I'm having a hard time asking the question. Is it more like, look, I didn't want to be married to a gay man, so I'm divorcing you, or was it betrayal trauma that is the big stickler?
I think the betrayal trauma is more of the big stickler.
Got it.
Yeah, for sure. But it's interesting because to this day, I actually am grateful that she decided to leave me, and here's why. Because I'm a good Mormon boy, and I was taught that when you get married, that's it. And I would have stuck it out to the bitter end, and I would have never had the courage to leave. She at least had the courage to leave, and we're both better off for it. So I will credit her for that, because it allowed us both to heal in our own ways and to find the person that we were meant to be with.
That's there's something to be said for that, because there is, there's this, I've heard it referred to as anxious attachment, I think, or something like that, anxious abandonment attachment. I don't know how you say it, but there's something of that. And yeah, I mean, if you've had it modeled in your life that you just stick it out no matter what, it makes that leap, that even if you think you need to do it, it makes it so hard,
Yeah.
because you're prone to, you're prone to the, well, brother Meldrum, you're going to have to look the savior in the eyes at the end of your when you go to the judgment bar. You're going to have to,
It's like,
are
so
you going
will
to tell
you.
him, are you, yeah, but are you going to tell him, can you go in there and honestly say you did everything you could to save your marriage, and you say, well, what does that mean? How much do
Yeah.
you have to take? And
Right.
it's, so you're going through this, you go through this situation. Tell me, when, you know I got to imagine also, you know you're experiencing, I mean, you're struggling too. I mean, you've been found out, this thing that you probably, at this point, the compartmentalization is no longer there. So you're
Oh,
feeling the
yeah.
shame of that. tell,
Oh,
tell me
yeah.
tell me more about that. Tell me what, because were you, we had Tony Overbay on not too long ago talking about narcissism, emotional immaturity, and avoidance of shame. We all do that in some form. So tell me what those days were like. I'm imagining that's the beginning of your dark period.
Yeah, yeah, that was the dark days. I was broken. I was just completely broken. I messed up. I got found out, and then of course, family comes a knocking. I'm like, well, what's going on? Why aren't you and John together? So then family finds out. So the coming out experience is a very personal one. And instead of doing it in a positive way on my own terms, it was done to me in a negative way. And so it was a very traumatic coming out experience for me. It wasn't positive at all.
So is
So
this
there,
sorry, let me stop you right there. I want to ask a quick question. So was this a situation where, when you're, after this happens, your ex is shouting it from the rooftops to anyone who will listen, or is it a situation where she's sharing with her family because they want to know why they're getting divorced? Right.
she did a fairly good job of just keeping it to within the family. Just the only people who needed to know
Right.
knew was the immediate family. She didn't go on Facebook and just blah, 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 how could you? You did this. Because I think there was a lot of shame and embarrassment on her part. So you know, she she spared a lot of my feelings for that way, and I did for the return that as well. Like I didn't go around and blast it. Now this sounds very one sided, and I just want to clarify that she was no angel either. Okay, she had a lot of her own issues and her own things that she was dealing with. She does deal with narcissism and controlling issues, like her dad, and so she was not always the funnest person to be around, even when.
Well, I think any marriage could tell you.
Exactly.
And that's that. I don't know if there's a married man or woman out there who thinks that their spouse is great all the time, but it
I
sounds like
do.
you had dealt with something different.
Well,
Well, there you
my
go.
now wife is amazing all the time.
That's good. That's good. You found somebody. But tell me more about that time. Tell me more about the time when
Oh,
you're feeling this. I gotta imagine sitting in that shame that you're feeling has got to be, it's got to be
oh,
tough.
Josh, I cried a lot. I
Yeah.
cried, and I cried some more. And then when I was done crying, I kept crying. I've never cried more in my entire life. I cried so much there were no more tears left. My face hurt from crying all the time. Like I would go to the store and I'd see somebody from behind that looked like my wife, and I'd just break down crying. I go to work at the Apple store and I'd be checking somebody in to do a phone repair, and they pull a picture up of their kids, and I just break down crying. Like I was a mess. Like it
What
was
was it?
bad.
What was it that you think like? What was the primary thing that you were? I mean, I'm sure it's multifaceted, but what was the thing that worried you the most? Was it your kids? Was it the fact that
That
your
I
marriages ended, that everybody knew? What was it
all
that
of it,
bothered you?
everything.
Yeah.
But probably the most, if I were to rank it, that that my marriage was ending because I didn't hate my wife. I loved her. I truly loved her, and I love my kids. I love them so much, and just to know that they were going to have to go through this experience at such a tender age, 1 and 3 years old, was just so more than I could process and bear at the time.
Wow. Wow, man. Yeah. They were 1 and 3.
They were 1 and 3.
Wow.
And the thing about that is they were too young to like they had some hurts, like, oh, why can't I see mom, or why can't I see dad, or whatever. But once they got 4 and 5 and even 6 years old, oh, it came out and manifested itself in really ugly ways. Like my son was kicking and screaming at transitions because he didn't want to leave. I mean, you got to remember, he'd only see me 2 days a week, and then I tell him, okay, it's time to go back to mom's house. Oh, he fought me. He didn't want to go. He wanted his daddy.
Yeah.
So that was hard. It was hard to watch them because children, we want to protect our children from all the horrible things in this world, and to know that my actions had led to their pain was just a dagger in my heart. And then seeing them just affect them the way that it did, it was awful, and I felt like a total shit human being for a long time.
Yeah, that's got to be rough. I mean, the effect that a divorce has on kids is very real, and even if it is the best thing, it,
Yeah,
it it's. I mean, you're dealing with something that has generational impact.
yeah.
We've all heard the statistics. That's
Oh yeah.
scary.
My now wife, Kayla, she helped me tremendously. So she grew up in a family of divorce. She was about 8 or 9 years old when her parents split, and she knows exactly how the kids were feeling. And she would help me through that. And she'd hold me and say, "Hey, you know what? Kids are going to be okay. I turned out okay. Kids are going to be okay." So she would kind of reassure me, and because I didn't know any divorced people. Like, I just didn't. I was the only divorced person that I knew. Well, that's changed. I know tons of divorced people now.
Yeah, yeah.
But I didn't know
No,
where to
that's
go.
true.
I didn't have any support.
Yeah. And it had to, talk to me a little bit about this, because when you have these situations, people, I find it really interesting in the church when someone gets, there tends to be in a lot of situations, right, where like everybody just kind of assumes what happened because it seems to be almost the same story every time, and the story is the guy goes and does something, uh, does something wrong, and poor doting housewife, situation, which yours has a flavor of that, right? I mean,
Oh
talk to
yeah,
me
I
about,
was the bad guy for sure.
yeah. So how did that manifest through going to church at that point?
So luckily, this was kind of interesting. We had just moved from Newcastle down to Roseville,
Hmm.
and then 6 weeks later, this big incident happened. So we had only been in the ward for like 6 weeks. So nobody
Hmm.
really knew us.
Hmm.
So I had the benefit of anonymity through that process,
Hmm.
which I'm very grateful for, because it's not like those situations where you've been in the ward for years and years and years and everybody knows you and everybody knows your business. Like,
Yeah.
luckily, I didn't have that.
Ah, okay. So did you feel like it sounds like you went through a church discipline process.
That's correct.
Um, how did you feel as you were going through that process?
Oh, I felt horrible. It's extremely intimidating to sit there and have 15 people who you don't know make snap judgments about you and not taking the time to get you know you like we're doing right now. And basically said, well, so you did this and that, and you lied and you cheated and you did all these terrible things. Like, you're terrible. And for those of you who don't know, when you go through a church disciplinary council, you have 6 people who are for you and 6 who are against you. Essentially, they're trying. 6 are trying to determine why you should continue to have your membership and privileges, and the other 6 are questioning that and trying to see if there's maybe a course for correction to revoke church membership or privileges. So the official verdict, and my stake president, it was a tough one because at this time I was starting to come back to church very slowly. And I was having an honest desire to change my ways. And so he actually ended up not excommunicating me, and back then what was called disfellowshipment. So that means I still am a member of the church. The rights of the priesthood are still with me. The gift of the Holy Ghost is still with me, but my participation in the church is severely limited. No callings, no prayers, no taking of the sacrament. I can't. Yeah, no ministering, things like that. I can basically show up to church and that's it.
Mm-hmm. So how long were you in that state?
A long time. A long time. Probably.
Like over a year?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a very long and hard road back. It took a long time. And I'll never forget the first time I came back to church, I had a panic attack. I got up in the middle of the sacrament, and I ran out, and I went in my car, and I just cried. Because I looked around and I saw all these families that were perfect. And, I was taught my whole life that families can be together forever through temples. And that was not true for me anymore.
Not you.
Yeah. I was going to be this gay single, father reject Mormon, and no one's going to want to be around me. I couldn't deal with it. So it was very hard for me to come back to church. I felt the judgment, even if nobody was overtly judging me, I felt judged. So
now that's it. I'm glad you said that the way you said that, because I've often wondered, when it comes to that part, do you think that was something that you were legitimately being judged, or do you think that was more something within you?
more so within me, but I know deep down we all judge. We all do.
Sure.
Whether we say it or not, we all are. If people were to hear my story, they're like, "Woo, John kind of did some terrible things to his former spouse." That's going to kind of be the general consensus.
Yeah. Well, and look, not to, I'm not, I certainly would never condemn you, nor do I condone, but at the same time, look, just because I find it really interesting that members, not all members, but I mean, this is just, and I hate to say members because this is people. I just say members because that's our group, is
right.
They tend to focus more on the things that other people are doing that they can see, and not necessarily the things that they're doing that nobody sees.
Right. Yeah.
And that's really frustrating. And I think that's just I think we probably all do that. It's much easier to call out somebody else's personal faults than it is to look at your own. That's for sure. But man, I think we would do a lot better to think about, the things that you personally are struggling with, rather than looking at some other person who's just trying to make it work. You said something at the beginning that I thought was really important, and part of the reason why I even started this podcast was because we're all just trying to do our best, and we all mess up. Some of us worse than others. I mean, I have been, really hurt and by people, and I've hurt people. I mean, it happens, and that's why we have an atonement, so that we can get through that. So
Right.
you're going through this, you end up this fellowship. Tell me more about that process. I've heard both sides. So I have a very good friend. I'm hoping to have him on the podcast, a very good friend who was actually excommunicated, and he believes it had to happen, and it was the best experience he's ever had, and
Hmm.
not ever had, but I mean, he needed to go through it, and he's grateful he went through it. And then
Yep.
I know a few people who haven't, but who have also, who do not share that same that same experience. And where do you fall in that? Do you think that your experience with the church discipline process was one of love or not? How did you?
At the time, it was hurtful because it was people calling me out and like I said, making snap judgments when they didn't really understand the full situation, especially where I felt like people just didn't really understand LGBTQ issues at the time, and there was just no compassion or understanding in addressing that. It was more like, well, you did this, this, and that, and just that was wrong and that was bad, and you shouldn't have done that. I'm like, okay, well, clearly, because we're all here, but like, let's try to see it from my perspective, at least a little bit. So I just wish there was a little more empathy and understanding, but it was. I would agree with your friend. It was a necessary process because I had to be broken down before I could be built back up, and the church has changed the way they do disciplinary councils. In fact, I don't even think they call them disciplinary councils. I think they
No,
call them membership review
yeah,
sessions. I don't know. I
no,
forget. I'd have to read the
they're
handbook
called
again.
they're called membership councils now. Yeah,
Membership
and
councils.
yeah. Now, you just so I'm clear, you said that it could have been met with more empathy. If you could recommend, like, they come to John Meldrum and say, hey John, when they're dealing with somebody who's dealing with LGBTQ issues, and we're going through this membership council, what recommendations would you give that you think maybe could have been better in helping you through your repentance process?
Oh, love, 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 love.
Uh-huh.
You have these very fragile souls who are coming to you because they have hurt and pain and anger and frustration and all the emotions that come with it. And as priesthood holders, as leadership in the church, it is absolutely 100% our duty to show Christ-like love and to be extremely gentle in judging our peers, because that is a very serious and sacred responsibility, because that could affect them for the rest of their life.
Mm,
If done in not the best way possible, they could be turned away from their creator, because of something careless that somebody said or did or didn't do. And luckily for me, I have enough sense to, not sense, but like I understand that people are people, and that I'm not going to let one bad experience affect my relationship with God.
yeah.
So I look at that experience as a good thing, as a positive thing, as a growing thing, and it's transformed the way that I approach my brothers and sisters in my faith. That I come with a lot of love and a lot of empathy, and I'm always willing to wrap my arms around somebody and just give them a listening ear.
So when you say like love, 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 what specifically would you say could have been done better? Like when you say love, 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 did you feel the fact that they were like kind of asking you questions?
Yeah.
They were poorly asked, or give me more an idea what you're talking about.
Well, so great question. So you walk into the room and they just start drilling you with questions. Well, it would have made the world of a difference to me if they would have prefaced it a little bit more, saying, "Hey, we understand this is tough. This isn't easy, and even though we don't know you on a personal level, we hope that we can spend some time today to get to know you a little bit, and our hope and our aim is to do the will of the Lord, and to most importantly." Conduct this in a way that you can feel His love in your life, something like that.
Hmm. Was your ex spouse involved in the process at all?
No, this was completely 100% me. Just
Mm,
me
okay.
and my leader, the Roseville stake leadership.
Wow. Okay. And do you feel like we we hear sometimes in scripture, reprove, be times with sharpness, and afterwards showing an increase of love. Do you feel like that increase of love was given to you at some point?
Eventually, yeah, I think
Yeah,
so. Yeah,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
that's good, and you're obviously still a member, so that's been that's it didn't break you, and
No, it didn't break me because, again, going back to this idea of not being a victim, I decided that I wanted to have a relationship with God, and I was going to do that regardless of what the church was going to say. Whether they excommunicated me or not, that didn't matter to me. I was still going to have a relationship with the big guy upstairs.
got it, got it. So now in this process, you're dating, and you mentioned that there was a good few year period where you started dating men and started to really, well, the dark period really started before that. You were doing it while you were dating. Talk to me about, I mean, you mentioned, it sounded like you mentioned that after your divorce, you kind of tried to figure out whether you maybe did want to engage with men or not. Talk to me about that period.
Yeah, so it's really easy. You just get your phone out, download some apps, and be like, all right, when and where? Let's do it. Get down to it. And unfortunately, that was my lifestyle for a while. It wasn't safe, wasn't practical.
What do you mean it wasn't safe?
Just meeting random people you don't know isn't a good idea. It's not.
Right,
It's not a
right.
safe thing. You don't know if they're going to hurt you. You don't know if you're going to end up on the 6 o'clock news. But
Sure.
I was so depressed that I would do anything to feel anything,
I
even
see.
if it just so I could not think of how depressed I was and not feel the pain. It's kind of like that show. Did you ever watch The Haunting on Hill House on
No,
Netflix? Did you ever watch that?
never
Okay,
watched it.
never mind. Well, there's this girl on there. Her name is Theodora, and when she touches people, she can see their memories and feel their emotions. And sometimes I like to identify as her because it's like I just wanted to feel something because feeling shitty was better than feeling nothing, just emptiness, nothing. Even if I was, engaging in sexual acts with people, at least I was feeling something and I wasn't alone. So that's kind of where my mind was at that time.
Wow. And as you're going through that, did you ever actually? You mentioned it sounded like what you're doing is you're just kind of meeting guys for random hookups. Is that
Pretty much, yeah.
and then, but any of them that developed into any sort of an actual relationship?
There was a few that I liked and that, we hung out and did some things together, but it never really went anywhere. None of
And
them ever did.
and do you think that that is more akin to just because of your, I guess, sexual preferences that you tend to more emotionally connect with females, or do you think it was just the types of guys that you were seeing?
Right, exactly. A little bit of both. Like the physical component was 100% there, but when it came to deep connection, emotional connection, real relationships, I knew what that felt like. I had been married for years to a woman, so I knew what that felt like, and I wasn't finding that with these guys. I wasn't feeling that deep connection that I was seeking for, that relationship material. And that's not to say that guys couldn't fulfill that for me. It was I just hadn't found it during that time.
So, as you're going through this process, how long? Well, how long was this time?
3 years.
3 years.
The
Okay.
dark years lasted 3 years.
Okay. And during that 3 years, I mean, did you feel like during those 3 years that you were going deeper and deeper down this kind of rabbit hole you're going down? Or
Yeah, I went down into it, and then I started to come back up. So it's just one kind of whoop.
what was it that changed that had you coming back up?
It was that prayer I was telling you about that I needed to change, that I needed to where where I was dealing with the suicide ideation, and I realized I needed to do something different in my life. That's when I started to ask some pretty heavy questions, do some soul searching, and start to reconnect with the big guy upstairs, and stop the self-destructive behavior, which unfortunately a lot of men do that post divorce or post breakup. They engage in some very, very risky behavior, whether it's promiscuous sex, whether it's drugs, whether it's drinking. That actually is very typical for people in my situation.
And
At that time.
in this situation, you're not going to church, I'm assuming, during this
No,
time.
no, I
Yeah,
was inactive for a while.
yeah. And so as you're going through this process, talk to me more about the prayer and what you felt that kind of changed you.
Yeah, yeah. So it's just kind of what I was mentioning before. I just went through my list. Like, do you want to live? Yeah. If so, what do you want to do with your life? You know, I kind of, and the mindset that what I was going through was I didn't filter my life through any model, paradigm, people's expectations, how I was raised, like anything that could influence me whatsoever. I said no. And I made this one decision truly from my being, from the depths of my soul. So I knew it was real. I knew it was really me. And when I decided to come back, oh, I came back and I was a different person.
Wow.
So that's actually why I have this symbol right here on my head. A lot of people don't realize it, but this is actually a phoenix. And like, if you know the mythological stories of Phoenix, it's a firebird that when it dies, it's reborn into a more beautiful and stronger, more powerful phoenix than before. And so I decided to use that as my identity for my business.
Interesting. Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
well now, okay, so let's and we'll talk about your business a little bit here too, but let's start with you know, you start coming back. And at what point, as you start coming back, did you say, "Hey, you know, I'm going to start dating women," or did you take a break from dating altogether? How did that happen?
Yeah, I took a break, focused on me. I started going to the gym, started getting swole, and started eating healthy.
I remember the transformation, man. You really cut down. You started muscles coming out and all that. I remember that happening.
Oh yeah, because I realized I needed to get my brain chemistry correct. Like when you deal with suicide ideation, you're not right in the head, and I was starting to be aware of that. Like, oh, hey, let's get my brain chemistry right. Let's start eating good foods, start going, you know, working out, running, getting some fresh air, and that has been my lifestyle ever since. But yeah, coming out of that I wasn't dating for a while, and I just focused on me and just started like doing some introspection and self healing, mindfulness, working on my mental health. I got into therapy, all that stuff.
How long was this period of self-reflection?
That's a good question. Probably about a year. So like the tail end of the 3 years of the dark years, kind of that last year, there was kind of like some dark times, but starting to come to the light.
Okay. And as you're coming through, one day you're like, you know what, I'm gonna give this mutual app a shot.
Yeah, yeah. And it was tough because you can't just turn the gay switch off. It doesn't work like
Right.
that.
Right.
So I had a lot of concerns going into this relationship with my now wife. But it was a process. Our first year was definitely rocky, navigating that whole thing. But I was absolutely 100% open and honest with her the entire time, because I refused to walk around eggshells and be
Yeah.
anything less than my authentic self.
So you start dating her, you meet her, and you told us about the story where you're like, oh, and by the way, I'm gay, and then she was like, well, at least you didn't abandon your kids.
Yeah.
So tell me what the dating process with your now wife was like.
So my current wife, I was so broke. I had no money. I don't know why she picked me.
Uh,
I had nothing. Like I was just a mess. I still look back at that and I'm like, you're so wonderful. I'm so glad you chose me. But it was we were two very broken people because she not only grew up with divorce, but her husband just left her for another family. So she went through a divorce as well. and she had a son. So we were two people who have both suffered divorce. That we were both single parents. We had both been inactive in the church, so we had a lot of common ground. And so we kind of like, well, we're both broken, so let's just be broken together, and let's put 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 back the pieces and help each other.
Wow.
So we started helping each other out, and making dinner for one another, and watching each other's kids. And I'll never forget the day that I knew that I loved her, because I put up a wall, and I tell her this. I tell everyone to this day, I put up a big freaking wall because I was kind of testing her a little bit to see if she would like really like if she was like for real. And I'll never forget the day that I knew that I loved her was I got stomach flu, and I was throwing up, and I was in bad shape. And I had the kids, and I couldn't really take care of them, a 2 and a 3-year-old. And she came over, dropped everything, drove all the way down from Yuba City, and she took care of me and my 2 kids and her kid.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
was like, who does that? Like,
Yeah.
made me
Your
soup,
wife.
and yeah, I was like, that's wife material right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So that was the day that I knew that I loved her.
Wow.
Because she had
Wow.
told me before that day, I love you, and I couldn't say it back to her. But that day I knew that I loved her.
Wow. That's awesome. So, uh, tell me the courtship. You mentioned, you said you were open and honest, and the first year was real rocky. I assume after marriage, it was rocky.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we lived together before we were married, which is also kind of a not so not a it's looked down upon in Christian circles, like, oh, you should only live with people you're married. So we lived together, and that definitely kind of ruffled some feathers. And but honestly, we knew we wanted to get married. And there was actually a very practical reason for it. We were both financially really strapped, and it didn't make sense for. She was coming over to my house almost every day anyway, and she had an apartment or a house she was renting in Yuba City. I had an apartment down here I was renting. I was like, let's just move in. This is gonna
Right.
happen anyway. So we probably lived together only about like 4 months, and then we got married soon after that.
I see. And then you mentioned it was rocky. What was rocky about it?
It's just I had a lot of fear that I was going to be unhappy with this decision, and that I'm going to wake up one day and be like, I shouldn't have married her. I'm too gay. Like I'm seeing that dude, and I'd rather be with him, and I've now ruined a second woman's life, and she's gonna leave me, and it's just gonna be my divorce all over again, and I can't handle that right now. I can't go through that again. So I had a lot of fear. Even after getting married, I still had fear. And then I ended up getting her pregnant, and we had a kid together. Still had my insecurities, still had my fear, but you know what actually changed all of that fear? I remember this very specifically. So, my little son, Austin, he was about 4 months old. And at 4 months old, they're still kind of a baby blob. Like you might get a few smiles, a few little interactions here and there. But I'll never forget, I was with my son, Austin, 4 months old, in the bedroom, and he was just laying there on the bed. And I was just overcome with grief and just sadness and fear for the future. Didn't know where the marriage was going. Didn't know if I had made the right decision. Like, yeah, we were married and we had a kid together, but there's still all those little fears in the back of your mind. And I'll never forget, I looked down at him, and he looked right up at me, eye contact, and he gave me the biggest, warmest smile that a 4-month-old could muster. And I'm telling you, Josh, when that happened, all of my fear melted away. I felt it was a spiritual experience that I knew I made the right decision marrying my wife, and that I was supposed to be a father to both her son and now this new little baby boy that we had together. And I've never looked back since. I've never had any doubt in my mind since that day. And I'm 100% confident that I did make the right decision.
Wow.
And I've
So one of the questions that came through from a listener was, what is the motivation for a woman to marry a essentially a gay man? I mean, what was the yeah, what I mean, how does that work for you guys?
Oh, easy. We we have sex. If that's what you're worried about, like gay men can still have sex, and we have all the right parts. Like,
Yeah. Well, I guess the issue and the person who asked, was just I think it was more along the lines of, well, if you're, and it sounds like you don't necessarily identify as gay per se.
right?
So I
It's a
think it was
loose
more,
term,
yeah, more of you sound more almost as though you are some form of bisexual or closer to bisexual than gay.
probably.
Yeah.
I think that's
So
fair.
well, let me ask you, do you feel like, because we had a conversation about this when we first started talking, was you said, I feel like I'm somewhere in between bisexual and gay.
Yeah.
Does that mean that you, I guess, physically are more attracted to men than women, but
Yes.
emotionally more attracted to women than men?
Yes, yes. That's why it's hard. It's kind of all over the place. What I will say to that listener, thank you for that question, by the way, listener. It's a good one, but I know a lot of gay men who are married to straight women, and you know what? We have a lot to offer. We companionship, being a great husband and being there for our wives, being great fathers and providers. Like we have so much to offer. And I will say this: I've talked to a lot of straight men married to straight women, and they're having problems with their relationship, and they don't have sex. I know a lot of straight couples who are in sexless marriages. So just because you're a gay man, that doesn't mean you're doomed to have a sexless marriage. It just means that you just have to navigate that. It takes communication. It takes two people talking about it, working through that. I know some gay guys that just can't even stand the thought of a woman, and that's not me. That's not who I am. I do very much enjoy physical intimacy with my wife, so I'm able to navigate that just fine.
Oh, okay. So, you mentioned also that it was rocky. Are you saying it was rocky for a while because you were still dealing with same gender attraction and it was coming pretty hard?
Yeah, I still had a lot of PTSD from my first marriage, a lot of insecurities, a lot of fear for the future. Wasn't sure if I was going to, go down the same paths, make some of the same bad mistakes, and just, ruin this person's life again, go through another divorce again. I had all those fears, but those have since subsided. So.
So kind of a fear of relapse, it sounds like, more than
Oh,
anything.
absolutely. Because being somebody, a self-aware porn addict, I will forever be a porn addict. That's just how I have an addictive personality. That I've used pornography as a method to mitigate and relieve my stress and anxiety. That's just what I've done. And if I don't keep that in check, it can spiral out of control, and I don't want to do that. So I kind of like an alcoholic, like you just accept that that's who you are, and
Yeah.
you work every day to be on top of it.
This just came to me and I wanted to ask, I think this is a good point to ask this. If you could sit down in a non volatile conversation with your ex-wife, to just say anything you could say to maybe heal both of you from that PTSD that I'm sure you both have, what would you say?
That's a very, very poignant question. It would just be that, you know, I don't blame you for what you did. You had to do what you felt was right at the time with the knowledge that you had, and you had every right to do what you did. Like it is what it is. I've already apologized a million times, but what I really want to say is, hey, let's acknowledge that we had a real relationship, that there was love there, and but that there was also hurt there, and it sucked for both of us. And let's move on from that, and let's do our best by doing the best for our children, and focus our healing by doing good things for them. Because right now we don't have a healthy co-parenting relationship at all. We don't talk. We don't. I mean, we now have court ordered co-parenting therapy. I mean, I've had a very recent court appearance where she has tried to take the children away from me again. So there's clearly some unresolved feelings there, or else why would she come after me like that? You know what I mean? So unfortunately, we
Is
have
that what
a
you?
long
Well,
ways
sorry,
to go.
let me stop you right there. What do you think it is? You think it's unresolved trauma from the betrayal, or do you think
Oh,
it's? You think that's what it is? Okay.
I think it's that mixed with homophobia, like not really understanding who I am. And I think that she has a snapshot of who I am 6 years ago. That the evil version of me in her mind has just kind of festered and, turned into this ugly, horrible thing. And the thing is, I'm just not that person anymore. Plain and
Yeah.
simple, and she's not around me anymore. She doesn't see me every day. She doesn't talk to me. She doesn't see the growth and the introspection that I've done as a human being. And so in her mind, I'm still this villain. I'm still this enemy. I'm still this negative, antagonist that needs to be quelled, squashed, removed, because heaven forbid our kids are going to grow up around a gay dad and they're going to turn out just like him, or who knows what's going through her mind.
And are those the subjects of the? Are those the subjects of these trying to take the kids away? Does it have to do with your sexuality most of the time?
Well, she'll never outright say it because it'll look bad in court, but it comes out in other ways. Like, well, you showed the kids a PG-13 movie and that wasn't appropriate, and so therefore we need to take the children away from you. I'm like, really? It's
Yeah.
like we watched Avengers. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
So she's taking the moral high ground of, well, we don't do that, and using it in court as a means to show that I'm this incapable, incompetent parent. And it's laughable. And thankfully, thank God, our judge saw through the ruse and dismissed their case completely and says, I'm not going to take away father's time with the children. In fact, I'm going to order co-parenting therapy is what I recommend. And they actually most recently tried to get a psych eval on me. And they were willing to submit to one too. But if you don't know, that they're very expensive, thousands of dollars to do that. And I just told the judge, I'm like, Your Honor, this is a step in the wrong direction. It's like, we just need co-parenting therapy. We just need to sit down in a room and get through our shit is what we need to do. But she's just unwilling to do that, and it's just unbelievable.
So, why? This just came to me. Why, if that's what she wants, why not just do it? Is it the expense? Like, why not just do that? Okay, let's do a spike test. Let's see what yours says. you know?
Again, I've been asking myself that all these years, and the only thing I can come to the conclusion is she has these betrayal traumas that you were mentioning, and homophobia. Those are the only two things that I can think of.
No. What I mean is why not just take the psych test? Be like, okay, yeah, we'll do it, and then it'll show I'm not crazy, and then.
Oh, because it's expensive. It's thousands of dollars.
It's the finances.
No, yeah, I'm not paying for that. No way. I'd rather get my kids into soccer or t-ball. I'd rather spend it on my kids.
Right. Okay. So, if you now your relationship now, so you find your marriage now. You've been married for how long?
Oh goodness, going on 4 years with my second wife.
Okay. So you're married for 4 years. You find this relationship to be fulfilling, makes you happy.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
Oh my gosh, she's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah. And you are now back into full fellowship with the church, right?
Oh yeah, I love the church. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're very active. Both of us.
Do you so I mean, it sounds like where you're at now sounds like you're happy.
Oh, absolutely. I actually this past Sunday I had the opportunity to stand in front of the congregation and share my testimony, and I just talked about gratitude. That was what was in my heart. I just felt so grateful for everything that's happened to me. And the question that you should have asked, but you didn't ask this,
Mm.
is do you wish you can go back in time and change anything? And I'd give you a big fat hell no.
Mm.
Because I needed to go through all this stuff to be where I am today. And I've just learned that some of us learn in this life through our own experience, and sometimes we learn through other people's experience. Like if we see somebody go get drunk and get into a horrible car accident, like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Like we can learn from that. And sometimes we're the kind of people that we have to experience something horrible ourselves to learn. And unfortunately, I'm the type that I have to experience myself to learn the lesson.
So with that, then, if there's somebody listening to this, and I think this doesn't even have to be necessarily with someone who's LGBTQ. That's a certain flavor of it. But
Hmm.
let's break it down. Let's ask a few things. What would you say to somebody who is currently in that dark place and struggling with divorce?
Okay, great question. That's a perfect segue. Something you don't know about me is I turned my pain into service, and I started a support group called Brave Dad Now, and it is a men's divorce support group that I ran for a few years while I was going through my healing, because I wanted to reach out to other dads who were going through divorce and say, "Hey, it's okay." Um, and that group got pretty large, almost 20 dads on a weekly basis. And then COVID hit, and then it went poof. It went bye
Mm,
bye.
yeah.
And I'm actually starting it up again in May.
Mm,
And I'm going to give a little plug to all your listeners. So on May 9th at 6:30 p.m. at the Sean Davis Therapy Group, we're going to be doing our kickoff lunch meeting for our for the Brave Dad Now support group, and we it's going to be once a month, and we're going to invite all men and dads 18 and older to come and check it out if you are wanting to support or get support. And we're going to be having some guest speakers, and it's going to be awesome.
no, that's great. And Sean
Yeah.
is a good guy. I really like Sean a lot. Sean
Sh-
Davis is
oh,
is
Sean's
really nice.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah,
Sean
he's
Davis
a
is great.
yeah, he's a good
Um,
dude. Um,
so
so
that's what I did. I started that group because I wanted to reach out to other people because nobody reached out to me. So what do you do? Like kind of what we were saying earlier, if there is no box, you create a box. So that's what I
yeah.
did. I started that group.
Mm. And so for somebody in that, if you have somebody's who's talking to you and says, "Hey, John, listen, I'm really in a dark place and I don't really know what to do," what would be your advice to him?
Great question. I would say first of all, breathe.
Mm.
Just breathe. Okay. Second thing I would do is if I'm physically right there with you, I'd say bring it in, brother. And give you a big hug. At least 10 seconds or it doesn't count. Okay, not because I'm gay, because I have a big heart. Okay, I'm huggy. I'm a really huggy person. And then after we hug it out, I'm gonna look you straight in the eyes. I'm gonna say to you that you are worth it. You have worth. You have value, and your life has meaning, and you're here for a reason. And I want you to stick around. Let's figure out a plan together to get you through this is what I would kind of start off. And then I would kind of ask some probing questions like, okay, so where are you at with everything? Is this, are you already been divorced? Are you thinking about divorce? Are you like in the dark place right now? Where are you at? And then for some guys, they're mental emotional. That's not a big deal. Some other guys, they need the hug it out method. Some guys are kind of more like, hey, what am I doing from a legal standpoint? And I always preface it saying, hey, I'm not an attorney, but here's what I did. But you should probably seek some legal help, or they might have some financial questions about child support. So I kind of ask those probing questions to kind of gauge what their needs are, because every guy's a little bit different.
Mm, okay. And then how about what would you say to somebody who's really struggling with porn addiction?
I would say remove the shame and the guilt because we are so afraid of what people think about us. We're so afraid of that guilt and that shame. Um, and once you remove that guilt and shame, it no longer controls you. And you know what's interesting? I honestly don't even really look at it very much. Once in a great while, like maybe if I have a super stressful day and I'm just really just feeling down and I just like, oh, okay, fine, let's just get it over with. Um, but I would say there are so many people who are just so have so much fear, guilt, shame. You know, what is my church going to think? What is my spouse going to think? What are people going to think? I'm like, guess what? We all statistically do it, or we all look at it, or if we're not looking for it, it'll come find us. So it's just part of it. So just, you know, it is what it is. If it's getting to a point where your life is being controlled by it, like you can't function throughout the day without needing it, then you probably should go talk to a specialist or go join a support group. That's what I'd say. But if it's just something that's like, if it's something that's ever like once in a blue moon, I think you're okay. You're still a good person. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means it's there, and just do your best. If
Do
that
you
makes
think
sense.
though, if you're so, how do you navigate that? Because like here's what I mean by that. You know, I have a lot of addicts in my family, and you know, my dad is as a recovering drug addict and has been clean for 25 years.
Oh,
And
congratulations to him.
yeah, and I got to say, like,
It's
and
a
I've
big
said it
deal.
on numerous podcasts before, he's a completely different person now that he was then, and I just applaud him. It's a huge success story. But yeah, I don't think if I were talking to him and he was going to talk about addiction, he'd be like, hey, you know, if you snort cocaine once in a blue moon, it's not that big a deal. You know, so what do you think? What, like, do you think, like, in a porn addiction situation, like, if someone is doing that, would you encourage them to continue to be completely abstinent? Are you saying, I guess what I'm saying is, are you saying get the shame and the guilt out of it because that just is self-loathing? You're working on it. It's over. Explain
Yeah.
more, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, let's dive into that. Okay, so this is true for me. This might not be true for everyone, but because I've opened the can of worms of being unfaithful, that is a very real possibility to me. I could go grab my phone and just go download one of those apps and just go find someone and go hook up with them. I could do that, and I understand that that's because that has been part of my past. Those scars will always be there, and I'm not going to ever say like, oh well, I'm active in the church and I will never do that again. It's like, no, I'm a weak person. I'm susceptible to that. So for me, pornography, if I'm getting those temptations, pornography is the lesser of two evils. So that's kind of the rationalization I use in my brain. I'm like, okay, well, pornography is the lesser of two evils, so let's just go with that.
So
So
if I'm understanding you correctly, then what you're saying is, for you, you use pornography as a buffer, so you don't cheat.
yeah, I think
Okay.
that's yeah. That's a
Okay.
very simple way to look at it. Yeah. And so I
Okay.
know there's a lot of people out there listening like, whoa, why would you do that? And I'm just like, well, you're not me. So, you
Okay.
know,
Okay.
that's my life and that's how I choose to live it. And, you know, you can guilt and shame me all you want. Like, how could you look at pornography? But I was like, you know what? There are way worse things I could be doing. Way, 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 way terrible things that people could be doing out there. So I'm like, in the long grand scheme of things, I'm like, it's not that bad.
So what did your wife? You sound like you're very open with your wife. How does she handle that? Like, if do you tell her, hey, you know, by the way, I looked at porn today, and you know, I shouldn't do that. Or, hey, how does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question. She knows about it. I just don't bring it up. It's like,
Mm,
why? Why talk about that? You know what I
mm-hmm,
mean? And I think as spouses, it's okay to have our little secrets. And I'm gonna explain why. Okay,
mm-hmm,
so just hang on to your hats. So when I was with my first wife, she came to me and said, well, I want to know everything. And I was like, everything? And she's like, yes, everything. I'm like, okay. Like, are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. I'm like, all right, you asked for it. And so blah, it came out. And it was that classic line, well, you can't handle the truth. Well, that's kind of what happened in this situation. It was too much truth all at once, like opened up the fire hose. And so I think it's okay to kind of open up in little spurts. Maybe not necessarily lying, but you don't need to go and say everything. And because what is going through your mind may not translate the way you want it to other people. They may perceive it differently than how you intended it. So that's why I think it's okay to kind of keep thoughts and secrets to yourself. Just let it stay there.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I think it depends, right? And what I mean by that is that like, so I'm an attorney, right? My clients get deposed. I depose other clients, and every attorney who's got a client that's been deposed, they tell them the same thing. Look, answer the question. Don't volunteer, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I think just to clarify, are you saying like, listen, if you're asked a direct question, you're going to answer the question, but you're not necessarily volunteering information that you think is going to be harmful?
Correct. That's a great way. Spoken like a true lawyer. I love it.
Right. I'm sure. That's why they pay me the big bucks here at the podcast.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. And so, like, if I'm walking down the street and I see a guy that's attractive, I'm not going to say anything to my wife. Why? Because I care about her feelings. And that little thought doesn't need to be in her brain. Like, why would I say that to her? To make her feel bad? Like, no, I'm not going to say that. So,
sure. Like, and that makes sense, right? I mean, I think anybody, gay or straight, I mean, like, yeah, you're not going to be every woman looking at your significant other and being like, oh, she's hot.
Yeah,
exactly. Hotter than you. You know what I mean? Like you know, they're not going to say that, but I guess what I'm saying, it sounds like what you're saying is look, if you're asked a question, you're not going to hide the information. You're just not going to volunteer information that doesn't serve a purpose.
Correct. Exactly. If my wife truly wants to know something, I will tell her. And we do have that trust and communication in our relationship, which I'm very grateful for. But like I said, I don't go around saying, "Oh yeah, I looked at porn today." That's just not. Why? Why tell her that?
Right. Okay.
You know.
So, do you think if she had heard, like, I mean, well, she may hear this podcast when she probably will. Like, is that going to be a surprise to her if she hears that? She's going to be like, "Whoa, he's looked at porn." It's not like your first wife where she's gonna be like, "How did you betray me?" And all that.
Yeah. So that is a night and day difference where I could talk about my issues with my second wife in a way I never could with my first. And she created a safe space where I could open up. So that was huge for me.
Yeah. Do you think if you're in your first marriage, had you just come out at the very beginning and said, "Hey, listen, I'm dealing with this same gender attraction stuff, and it's something that I've dealt with for a long time," do you think well, one, would you have just never been married at that point? Or two, do you think it would have opened up a better communication line when you did get married?
It would have, yeah, great question. I would say it would have never worked out. She would have never married me. It would have been a deal breaker from the beginning. But we were doomed from the beginning because we weren't compatible. We weren't compatible. We never should have got married, but you live, you learn.
But you got your 2 kids from it. So.
I did. I got 2 beautiful kids out of it, and I don't regret it. I do not regret it because, like I said, I wouldn't be the person I am today, and I did get 2 beautiful children out of that relationship, so it wasn't like a total failure.
Yeah. The so now what would be your message to somebody who is what would be your message to somebody who's coming back to church? What would you tell them?
That's a great question. Is this somebody who earnestly wants to come back to church, or maybe kind of thinking about it, or is like still kind of hurt by the church?
Well, I think really I'm looking at somebody who's a little on the fringe. They're kind of wanting to come back,
Yeah.
and has a desire, but maybe has some hurt or he doesn't really know how to start.
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think that there is a lot of value going to church, and I I think it's something that everyone should strive for, even if they've had past hurt, if they don't feel like they fit the norm or they kind of feel like an outsider in any way. Go because you want to go and because you love God, and don't do it because of anybody else. That will change your motivation sincerely, because if you go to church thinking, well, the church, nobody came out to me, and nobody did this for me, and blah 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 blah, who cares? Don't even go for anyone else, go for
Yeah.
you, and go because you love God. And if you make God your motivation, it'll change everything.
Yeah.
Your relationship with God is number one, and the church is just there to support that relationship. Once you get that through your head and understand that, then you can be more forgiving towards the church. Like if there's a policy you don't agree with, or somebody said something or did something that offended you or whatever, that's fine. The church isn't perfect. We all know that. And we have a rocky history. Guess what? It doesn't matter, because, again, the church supports your relationship with the big guy upstairs. Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ are your number one. So keep that in mind as you're coming back to church. And I would say, instead of try to shift your focus, instead of saying, well, what can I get out of church? Maybe you could shift your focus of, what can I give to those who attend church? How can I love other people? How can I serve other people? Because there's a magical thing that happens once you start to help other human beings. You start to forget your own problems, and you start
Mm.
to heal. So I would try and shift your mindsets. It's not the act of going to church, physically going to a building, isn't going to spiritually change you. It's more about your intention and where your heart and your mind is.
Yeah, that's a good point. I often tell people when they ask me, especially people who have struggled with church, um, I say, my testimony isn't connected to the bishop or the stake president or the elders quorum president. It's connected to God, and that's what the most important thing. So, so John, I've really appreciated. We've been going now for over 2 hours, and we started real late, and you had some scheduling conflicts, and so I'm like, well, let's do it. Let's get it done. And it's getting late, but I want to ask you a few questions I ask everybody, and
Okay.
just see what your answers are. First question: what would you say is your biggest success in life?
Oh, hands down, my wife and children.
Hmm.
That
Yeah.
is that is my biggest success.
Yeah.
I brought beautiful children into this world, and I got to choose a stepson, and like, I could screw up everything in this life, but if I can raise successful human beings, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then what would you say is your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it? I think we know where you're going here.
Well, clearly I failed my first marriage. That's kind of a
Mhm.
given. But I think if I really dig deep, I would say that it's not just the marriage. Is I failed myself, and what I mean
Mm,
by that is I failed to get to know who I was,
mm,
and to fearlessly accept who I am, and to not live a life of fear.
mm,
If I would have really taken the time to understand who I was, and to really know who I am and love myself, yeah, I think I would have come out a lot earlier. I would have, accepted that part of myself, and yeah, my life would have looked differently. So I think my biggest failure was to really understand and love and accept who I was.
Before I ask my last question, there's one other question that came through that I wanted to ask you, which I thought was really interesting and thought provoking.
Hmm.
So I want you to assume that the church came out and announced that um, that gay people can now get married and be members of the church
Civilly or in the temple?
in the temple.
Okay.
Would that change anything for you about where you are in your life now?
Yeah. First of all, I'll be like, damn, like, wow, that's like a big deal.
I think we all would. I think we all would. It was a hypothetical that was posed, and I
Yeah.
thought it was interesting.
So, but I think I know where you're getting at with this question. So the question is like the possibility of maybe me being married to a man in the temple and kind of that whole scenario. I I have chosen my path. I have chosen my wife. She is my forever person. And gay or straight, man or woman, if you find somebody in this world that truly loves you, that's something worth fighting for. That's something worth holding on to. And because my wife truly loves me for who I am, you better believe I'm going to hold on to that and fight for that. And even if I see, like, Zac Efron coming my way, shirt off, and he's like, hey, let's go, I'd be like, nice try, not today, Satan. No. Because I've made a commitment to my wife. She's my one and only. She's my forever. And we got sealed in the temple, and because I've made a commitment to my wife. She's my one and only. She's my forever. We got sealed in the temple, and
Sorry about that. I'm back.
okay.
Okay. So
All right.
I'll do a little cutting here to make sure get some of that dead air that just happened off of the thing. But I got the rest of your answer right before it froze, so I appreciate your answer there. The last question I have, and by the way, I got to say you are 100% right on that. When it comes to if you can find somebody in this world who cares about you and loves you for who you really are, you got to hang on to that person and be faithful to that person, and you know, and that's huge. So the last question is this. I ask everybody the same thing, and that is that one day you're going to pass away. We hope it's decades down the road you're going to pass
Hmm.
away.
Yeah.
And when you do, there's going to be a funeral and a eulogy.
Hmm.
What's the one thing that you hope someone says in your eulogy?
Oh man, that's easy. That John lived his life in a way that he was true and honorable to his convictions, and that he exemplified those convictions by the way he treated others, just loved other people. And I
Yeah.
think that's something deep down we all kind of strive for, is that we're remembered in a positive way.
Yeah. Well, John, I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your story. Like I said, I mean, it takes a lot to come on a podcast with somebody and share a story, especially one to an audience that is probably going to have a lot of different thoughts about what you had to
Whew.
say.
Oh, I
And
know. I'm gonna ruffle some feathers.
yeah, well, but I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. Everybody has a view of what is supposed to happen and what it's supposed to look like and what life is supposed to look like. And sometimes, unfortunately, life does not go the way that you expect. It certainly didn't go the way you had hoped and expected when you first got married the first time. Definitely didn't go the way your ex-wife had hoped it would go. Your now wife had a first marriage that didn't go the way she expected it to, and now it sounds like the two of you are doing incredibly well together, and you're raising this blended family. I think in some ways, there are things that people are going to come away from this podcast and they're going to think, I disagree with a lot of some things that John said, and I think there are some things that are beautiful, and there's probably going to be somebody out there who's dealing with similar issues to you who is going to find this a breath of fresh air. It's really hard. It's really hard, and I don't think members of the church who aren't experiencing this understand. It is really hard to sit in those pews when your family does not look like the rest of them and hear people say the things that they're saying that they should be saying, that you know they should be saying and are good things to say, but when you don't have those things or you don't look that way, it's really hard to sit there and listen to. And so I think having someone like you come on and share your experience is only going to help help those people. You know, I shared I shared with you at the beginning, you know, there's gonna be people out there who are gonna listen to this and be like, I disagree with this or I disagree with that. Or and the thing is that, like, in fact, I'll tell you, I had a conversation with somebody in the church who we were talking about some of these things, and they said, I think generally people in the church are fine. And I go, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think that the majority of them are doing fine. But Jesus didn't talk about that. He talked about leaving the 99 and finding the one. And I bet in every congregation there is more than one that is struggling with one or more of the issues that you've gone through, things that I've gone through. And hopefully listening to this is going to help that person.
Yep, that's why I'm outspoken. That's why I'm not afraid to talk about it, because, like you said, there could be that one person out there that listens to us, and it could be a breath of fresh air to them.
I hope so. I hope so. I hope that people came away and they learned a little something. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of comments and messages, and I have on every podcast, John, just so you know. So it's not
How
anything
big is your
secret.
audience? Holy cow! You're making me nervous.
Well, no, you know, you are probably my 27th, 28th interview, so it's not huge. It's still new, but I do have some loyal listeners who talk to me after every podcast, and
Sweet.
they share their experiences, and most of them are good and positive. But I think that it's important that we hear that not everybody is on this same spiritual plane or journey. And I'm grateful that you came on and shared yours, because it's not something that a lot of people experience, but there are people out there who are experiencing it and are trying to navigate it. And so where can someone, if they want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am all over social media. I would say, if you guys want to reach out to me, you can find me on Instagram, and just hit me up on, just search Brave Dad Now on Instagram. Send me a DM.
Okay.
All one word.
Brave Dad Now. Okay.
Yep, spelled exactly like it is. So
Okay. Well, great. Well, John, it has been a pleasure. At this point is where I say subscribe if you've made it this far into part 2 of this. I subscribe. We're everywhere. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, everything, all the podcast stuff. So we got a lot of cool stuff coming up still. We got next week, if all willing, I got a middle school teacher / punk rock lead singer / luchador who's gonna come on, who also fought brain cancer and does brain cancer fundraisers. It's gonna be a wild story too. So we got all sorts of fun stuff coming up. So keep listening. And again, thanks, John. Really appreciate you coming on. Keep me informed on how Brave Dad Now goes.
I will. Thank you, Josh.
All right. We'll see you guys later.